Thanks for staying tuned. This is Game On. It's now time to delve into women's football, and it's all about the Southern African Regional Football Tournament known as the COSAFA Women's Championship, or the COSAFA Women's Cup, if you want to call it that. And we've had quite a handful of entertaining matches over the period of the tournament. Rather, surprisingly for host nation South Africa, they're out of the competition as they couldn't make it through to the semi-finals. Shocking, it must be said, considering they've won 7 of the last 10 editions of the tournament. Now, joining me to discuss this is former Banyana midfielder Pinky Matjekane, who is on the show this morning. Good evening, Pinky. It's good to have you on the show.
Good evening, Goodwill. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening to your listeners as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let's start with the basic. What do you make of South Africa's outing at this year's COSAFA Women's Cup, especially their failure to qualify for the semi-finals?
Listen, I think with the team, they started off with a little bit of hiccups, the Hollywood bet, because we know some of the players who are based abroad, they are not available. But also it clashes with the COSAFA clashes with the Hollywood bet league that is taking place right now. So some of the players were not being able to be released from their teams. So it was a bit of a hassle for Coach Desiree to get some of the players from the teams and getting 2 players or 3 players from each team. So it was that from the start.
Okay, let's look at the dominance of the Banyana when it comes to Southern African football, especially the COSAFA Championship. I said earlier, out of 10 editions, this is the 11th. The last 10, South Africa have won 7. Shows you the dominance of Banyana when it comes to regional football right there. And you were once a member of this team. Do you think the failure to qualify for the semi-final is a sign that South Africa's dominance when it comes to women's football in COSAFA is waning?
Not really. I wouldn't say that, because I remember COSAFA, what COSAFA stands for is for young upcoming players to come up and show their talent. So if we don't do that, we keep on playing the same faces all the time, so we won't have progress. So we take this as a learning curve and also as a building players who are upcoming. So we have a pool of players when we lose the Katlanis, all these players who were featured in the World Cup, so we can replace them. So yes, they didn't advance to the next stage, but however, like I said, we take this as a learning curve, but also as a building block for the team.
Okay, let's look at the year in review now for South African women's football. We know it's had that historic high when it comes to the Women's World Cup, with the Banyana team reaching the second round of the Women's World Cup right there. This definitely is a low point, but do you think this has an overall impact considering the stunning year Banyana have had?
Look, when we look at the World Cup, women's football is evolving, and we've seen how European countries, we can even beat the European countries that have a league, a proper league, where else we don't have a proper league. Holistically, I'm talking about Africa as a whole. We struggle with simple things like infrastructure, having a proper professional league where we can compete on a daily basis, where else these countries and in Europe, in US, they have players who play constantly in the most competitive leagues. So I think, that's where we need to start off, have players, leagues that are very competitive, that these players are used to playing in and out every week, so they can get used to, playing as with each other and playing and knowing each other more.
Yeah. You've answered a bit of my next question. It simply, went ahead with that response. But I would ask you the final question, which is, considering women's football, as you've said, is evolving, what are the reforms you would expect to be implemented, not just in South Africa or in COSAFA, but across Africa generally, for the women's game to be elevated further than it is at this point in time?
I think let's start by grassroots. Let's identify talent, because we do have talent in Africa, but let's build systems and structures that are proper. Let's say, for example, we have a under 70, under 7, under 8, under whatever, and then from there we build, going up. So when we have all these players that are competing in the Olympics, in World Cup, and they're fading out, then we have players that are coming in the system, that we don't lose them in the system. Even if they go to US, for example, they go to study, they go to other teams, we still have them in the system. We keep track of certain players that are being bought in certain leagues, but we do have systems that are in place, but that are professionally managed. I think that's where we need to start. Basis, development, proper systems.
Okay, that's definitely a good step, and hopefully our football administrators across board and all regions would take some of these, reforms into consideration and implement them, so that we have further growth when it comes to women's football, not just in COSAFA but across the continent of Africa. Thank you so much, Pinky Matjekane, for your time on the show this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.